Imagine giving your whole heart to someone only for that person to laugh at your pain and disgrace you in front of strangers, including your maid. Imagine sitting inside your own house, helpless, while the woman you call your wife brings her boyfriends to eat and drink right before your eyes. This is the sad story of Richard, a man who became crippled after a terrible accident, and the wicked wife, Vivian, who insulted and humiliated him every single day. But what Vivian didn't know was that the man she despised was keeping two powerful secrets that would later change everything. Let's watch it together. Richard was the kind of man that made people whisper in the neighborhood. Back then, every young boy wanted to be like him. Strong, hard-working, and generous, he lived a good life. People respected him, and women admired him. But life doesn't give warning before it hits you. One rainy evening, while Richard was coming back from work, a careless driver lost control of his lorry. The sound of the crash was like thunder. When the dust cleared, people were running, shouting, and crying. Richard survived, but his legs did not. After many months in the hospital, he came back home in a wheelchair. The strong man that once stood tall now needed help just to move from one corner of the house to another. He thought his wife, Vivian, would stand by him. She was beautiful, attractive, and had once sworn before God and man to love him in sickness and in health. Richard trusted her. He believed she would be his strength when his own strength failed. But he was wrong. At first, she pretended to care. She helped him to bed, cooked his food, and gave him water. But soon her sweetness disappeared. Vivian's mouth became sharper than a blade, and her heart harder than stone. "Look at you," she would hiss disgustingly. "A whole man, now sitting down like wood. What use are you to me again, Richard? Tell me." Richard never answered. He only bent his head, hiding the tears that wanted to fall. The insults didn't stop there. Vivian made sure their new maid, Sandra, witnessed everything. Sandra was in her mid-20s, a simple girl who came to the city to work so she could support her younger siblings. She was gentle, respectful, and always quiet. But Vivian used her as a weapon. Whenever Richard asked for something small like water, food, or even help to move his wheelchair, Vivian would shout loudly, "Sandra, come and help this useless man before he starts crying like a baby. Can't you see him dragging himself like a worm?" Sandra's heart would tighten with pity as she rushed to help. Sometimes she avoided Richard's eyes because the pain there was too much to bear. Other times, when their eyes met, Richard saw compassion in her, something Vivian never gave him. One hot afternoon, Richard's stomach rumbled. He had not eaten since morning. Slowly, he pushed his wheelchair to the veranda, hoping the fresh air would calm his hunger. Vivian was sitting on the sofa, fanning herself lazily. Sandra was mopping the floor. "Vivian," Richard said softly, almost like a beggar in his own house, "please, can you give me a little food? I am weak." Vivian threw back her head and laughed. "Food? Did you buy food in this house? Do you work to put anything here? You think I'll waste my food on a cripple? Please don't disturb me." Sandra froze on the mop. She looked up, her lips trembled, but she said nothing. Vivian clapped her hands sharply. "Sandra, go to the kitchen, bring that burnt rice from yesterday. Since this man is useless, let him eat useless food too." Richard's heart sank. Neighbors outside could hear everything through the open window. Richard already knew that by the following days, the whole street would gossip. Sandra hesitated, her eyes full of sympathy, but Vivian's hard stare forced her to obey. She carried the small burnt pot of rice and placed it before Richard. The smell was sour, almost rotten. With shaky hands, Richard picked up the spoon. Every bite tasted like humiliation. Vivian smiled cruelly, crossing her legs. "You better get used to it," she yelled. "This is your life now, sitting there like wood while I feed and clothe myself. Do you think I married you to suffer? Even in bed, you cannot satisfy me anymore." Sandra gasped quietly and turned her face away. Richard's chest burned with shame. Those words cut him deeper than any knife. That night, the rain fell heavily, but inside the house, Richard's heart was colder than the storm outside. When it was time to sleep, Vivian carried her pillow to the sitting room. "I cannot sleep beside a man that smells like hospital," she said harshly. "Stay in your wheelchair, that is your bed now." Richard turned to the wall, silent tears rolled down his cheeks. From her small servant's room, Sandra heard everything. She tightened her fists under her thin blanket. She wanted to do something, or even walk to Richard's side, but she knew her place. She was only a maid. The next morning, Vivian dressed in her best gown, painting her lips with bright red lipstick. She admired herself in the mirror, humming like everything was fine. Richard, who sat weakly in his chair, asked softly, "Where are you going so early?" Vivian turned sharply, her face full of irritation. "And since when did I start answering to you? Do I owe a cripple like you any explanation?" She hissed, picked her bag and slammed the door. Hours later, she came back, but not alone. Two of her friends followed her in with shopping bags. The smell of perfume filled the house as they laughed like excited schoolgirls. "Hey, Sandra," Vivian shouted, "come and carry these things inside. Can't you see our hands are full?" Sandra quickly collected the bags. Richard watched silently from his corner. "Where did you get money for all this?" he asked weakly, almost with a breaking voice. Vivian paused for half a second, then exploded. "Since when did you become my father? Do I ask you how you waste your useless time in that chair? Mind your business, Richard." She stormed away, with her friends laughing behind her. Later that night, when Sandra came to clear the plates, she found Richard staring and lost in thoughts. His face looked really sad. "What have I ever done to deserve this pain?" he suddenly asked in a sad voice, even though he wasn't expecting any answer from the ordinary maid. Sandra's heart melted, her throat tightened. She wanted to tell him the truth, that Vivian was wicked, that she didn't deserve him. But she swallowed her words. She was only a maid. Her voice didn't matter in that house. Instead, she bent slightly and whispered, "Sir, don't lose hope. God is watching. One day you'll be fine." Richard looked at her. For the first time in months, he felt a little comfort, like a small flame in his darkness. But as he closed his eyes, he wondered, when will that day come? As the days turned into weeks, Richard's life only became sadder. What was supposed to be a home had turned into a prison of insults. Every morning, Vivian woke up with bitterness in her mouth, and every night she went to bed with hatred in her heart. One morning, the sun was hot and children were playing football on the street, shouting and laughing. Richard sat quietly by the window, watching them, wishing he could join. Vivian was in the bedroom, humming as she dressed. She came out wearing a red gown, her high heels knocking on the tiles, and her perfume filled the whole house. This moment, Sandra walked up to Richard. "Good morning, sir," she greeted as she gave Richard a cup of warm tea. "Thank you, Sandra," Richard replied gently. His voice carried a warmth but tired gratitude. Vivian overheard and turned sharply. "Sandra," she barked, "did I tell you to waste my milk and sugar on this useless man? Do you think he needs tea to sit down in that chair all day?" Sandra froze, her hands were shaking. "Sorry, Ma, I just thought," she wanted to explain, but Vivian cut her off. "You thought what?" Vivian's eyes burned with anger. She collected the cup of tea from Richard's hand and poured it over his both. Richard screamed in pain from the hotness. She continued, "From today, let him drink plain water. Do you hear me? Tea is for people that work, not for people that sit like statue." Richard lowered his eyes. He didn't want to see her pity. He felt really embarrassed and humiliated. Tears threatened to fall from his eyes, but he held them back in pains. That afternoon, Vivian brought two of her friends home. They were loud, gossiping and laughing. Their voices echoed through the compound. Richard tried to wheel himself into his room to avoid them, but Vivian blocked him. "Where are you going? Sit there," she ordered, pointing to the middle of the sitting room. "Please, Vivian," Richard started softly. "Shut up," she cut him off. "You will sit here and listen to real women talk, so maybe you will remember how to be a man." Her friends burst into laughter. "Ah, Vivian, you are too much," one teased. "See how you are enjoying life and controlling this man, while some of us are still suffering." "Yes, oh," Vivian replied proudly. "Me, I cannot kill myself because of Cripple. Life is for the living." Richard felt humiliated as the women laughed. He wished the ground would open and swallow him. Later, as her friends were leaving, one of them looked at Richard and shook her head. "Vivian, you are trying. If it was me, I would have dumped him long ago." Vivian laughed loudly, not caring that Richard could hear. "Don't worry, very soon I will enjoy my life fully. This one cannot hold me down." Richard turned his wheelchair to face the wall. His heart bled in pain to every of her words. That evening, Sandra quietly helped him into his room. She spread his blanket carefully and whispered, "Sir, please don't mind, madam. You are a good man." Richard forced a weak smile. "Thank you, Sandra. You are the only one who still talks to me like I'm human." Sandra looked down shyly, then left. The next day, Vivian's wickedness reached a new level. It was Sunday morning. Families in the area were dressing for church. Richard, who used to be a choir member, sat in his wheelchair already prepared. He wanted to go, even if it was just to sit quietly at the back. "Vivian," he said softly, "please, can you take me to church today?" Vivian was applying lipstick in front of the mirror. She stopped, turned, and stared at him. "Church?" she scoffed. "So that people will laugh at me for dragging a cripple around. Do you want to disgrace me? Please, sit down in this house. God is everywhere, and he can see you from here." Richard felt broken. His chest ached, but he said nothing. When Vivian left, dressed in fine lace, Sandra came into the sitting room and gently placed a hand on Richard's lap. "Sir," she whispered, "don't worry. God still hears your prayers." Tears filled Richard's eyes, but he blinked them away. Later that week, Vivian started bringing strange men to the house. They were well dressed, smelling of expensive perfumes. One of them even patted Richard on the shoulder like he was an old friend. "Oh, sorry, man," the man said mockingly. "Life isn't balance, but that's how it is." Vivian laughed softly, holding on to the man's arm. "Sandra, bring us drinks, and make sure this one," she pointed at Richard, "does not disturb us." Sandra's face burned with anger, but she obeyed quietly. Richard sat in silence, watching his wife flirt openly in his own house. It was unbelievable and heartbreaking, but there was nothing he could do. That night, when the man finally left, Richard wheeled himself into the bedroom as Vivian was removing her jewelry in front of the mirror. "Vivian," he said softly, "what are you doing to me? Have I offended you? Has it gotten to this?" Vivian laughed coldly. "Offended me? Yes, you have. You are my biggest offense, Richard. If not for that accident, maybe I would still respect you. But now, you are nothing, just a burden I regret carrying." Richard's heart felt like it would stop. He turned away with tears, real heartfelt tears burning his eyes. Days passed, and Vivian's cruelty only grew worse. She forced Sandra to wash Richard's clothes outside in the open yard so that neighbors would see. She ordered Sandra to serve him burnt food, anything to disgrace him. One evening, when Richard tried to wheel himself to the kitchen for water, Vivian blocked him. "And where do you think you're going?" she barked. "I just want water." Richard's voice cracked. Vivian hissed, "Sandra, give him water in that old broken cup. Let him drink like the beggar he is." Sandra obeyed, but her eyes burned with quiet anger as she placed the cup in Richard's hands. That night, when Vivian was asleep, Richard whispered in pain, "I don't know how much I can take anymore. Sometimes I feel like dying will be better." Sandra's heart squeezed. She knelt by his chair, almost crying with him. "Sir, please don't say that. You are stronger than you think. She cannot decide your fate. One day you'll be well again." Richard looked at her closely, and this time he saw not just pity, but something else in her eyes. Like respect, maybe even care. He swallowed hard and nodded slowly. But what neither of them knew was that Vivian's wickedness had not even reached its peak yet. The house that once echoed with laughter now carried only the sound of insults. Every corner of Richard's compound smelled of bitterness. He used to wake up each day with hope, but now mornings felt like punishment. One morning, Richard woke up weak. His head was hot and his whole body was in pains. He coughed until his chest hurt. "Sandra," he whispered faintly. Sandra rushed in from the kitchen. "Sir, what is it?" she asked. "I don't feel well. Please, can you give me little water?" Sandra quickly poured a cup and held it to his lips. His hands were shaking as he drank it slowly. Just then, Vivian entered the room. She wore another fine dress and her wig bounced as she walked. She stopped, her face twisted in irritation. "What is this again?" she yelled. "Ma," Sandra said carefully, "Ogre is not feeling well. I think we should take him to hospital." Vivian's eyes widened in surprise. "Hospital?" she mocked. "With which money? You expect me to waste my sweat on him again? Let him stay there. If it's his time, let him go." Sandra gasped quietly. Her hand tightened on the cup, but Richard managed to speak. "Please, Vivian," he begged weakly. "Don't talk like that. I just need small care." Vivian hissed loudly. Even the neighbors could hear. "Care? I should care for you. Did I marry you to become nurse? Sandra, leave him. If he wants to die, let him die." She turned and walked out, slamming the door. Her reaction broke Richard even more. Sandra knelt beside Richard with tears in her eyes and whispered, "Don't worry, sir. I'll do my best to care of you." For the next few days, Sandra secretly nursed him. With her little savings, she cooked pepper soup, wiped his sweat at night, and prayed quietly for him. But Vivian noticed. One evening, she returned home with another shopping bag and found Sandra sitting beside Richard, fanning him gently. "So this is what you now do in my house, Anne?" Vivian shouted. "You and this useless man are now playing husband and wife behind me. Sandra, I warned you. Your job is to cook and clean, not to sit with Cripple." Sandra jumped up, shaking her head. "No, Ma, it's not like that. He was very sick, so I—" "Shut up," Vivian yelled. "From today, if I see you near him again, you will go back to your village empty-handed, useless girl." Sandra nodded in fear. Richard tried to defend her. "Vivian, please, don't talk to her like that. She didn't go anything bad. She was only helping me." Vivian turned quickly to him. "And since when did you start defending Maid against me? Oh, is she your new wife now? I see. You disgust me, Richard. I regret the day I followed you to church." Richard's heart broke into 1,000 pieces. He couldn't say any more word. The next weekend, Vivian's wickedness went higher. She invited another man into the house. Richard was in the sitting room when they entered. Vivian did not even try to hide her joy. She held the man's arm like a young girl in love. "Baby, sit down," she said sweetly, guiding him to the sofa. "Sandra, bring drinks for us." Sandra came from the kitchen. Her eyes widened when she saw the man. She glanced at Richard, who sat in his wheelchair like a shadow. His eyes looked lifeless, his lips pressed together. The man smiled mockingly at him, pecking Vivian in a lustful manner, and whispered something faintly to her ear. Vivian laughed loudly, hitting the man playfully on the chest. Richard could not breathe. His chest felt tight as he watched his wife disgrace him in his own house. When the man finally left, Richard wheeled himself slowly into the bedroom. He opened the drawer where he kept old documents, searching for something to remind himself he was still a man. His shaky hands touched land papers, certificates, business files. He pulled one out, staring at it with blurry eyes. Vivian walked in suddenly. "What are you doing?" she demanded. Richard quickly hid the file. "Nothing, just looking," he pretended. Vivian's eyes narrowed. "Don't waste your time. Those papers cannot give you legs again. They cannot make you man again. Forget them." She snatched the file and pushed it back inside the drawer. Richard bowed his head. That night, he lay awake, staring at the ceiling. He couldn't close his eyes, couldn't sleep. Inside his chest was a raging storm. "Sandra," he whispered as she passed his door with a bucket of water. "Sir?" She came in quietly. Richard's voice trembled. "Do you believe I can walk again? That all this—" His voice broke. "All this will end someday." Sandra's eyes filled with tears. She knelt by his bed, shaking her head. "Yes, sir. You are still alive, and God is not done with you. Don't let Madam's wickedness push you to give up. You are bigger than this pain." Richard turned his face and looked at her. He couldn't control his emotions any longer. He broke down and cried bitterly. He couldn't believe the very woman that exchanged those wedding vows with him would be the one causing him such undeserved pain. It really hurt, but there was still nothing he could do in his situation. And deep inside, he wondered how long a man could carry shame before life itself crushed him completely. That evening, Vivian came home with another man. This one was different from the others. He looked younger, flashy, and proud. He carried her shopping bags into the house while she laughed like a spoiled schoolgirl. Richard was in the sitting room, but Vivian didn't care. The young man laughed loudly and then spoke cruelly. "Why are you still keeping him here? Throw him out so we can enjoy life together." Richard's jaw tightened. He wanted to retaliate, but he kept quiet. He had learned that silence can cut deeper than words. Sandra placed the food Vivian ordered her to bring on the table. Her hands trembled. She glanced at Richard, who was staring at the wall as if he wasn't even in the room. After the man left, Vivian came back to the sitting room. Richard turned his chair toward her, his voice calm but firm. "I know you hate me, Vivian, but one day your wickedness will return to you. Remember, life does not stay the same forever." Vivian rolled her eyes. "Please, keep your crippled proverb. Life has already changed for you. You are finished. But as for me, Vivian, I am just starting." She grabbed her bag and stormed into the bedroom. Days passed, and Vivian's shamelessness grew worse. She started talking openly with her friends about her lovers, even while Richard was sitting there. Sometimes she would even joke that Richard was half dead and no longer a real man to satisfy her in bed. One afternoon, while Sandra was washing clothes in the backyard, she overheard Vivian on the phone. "Yes, baby," Vivian was saying sweetly. "Don't worry, next week's party will be perfect. We will celebrate your new contract. Just make sure you invite all your friends. I want everybody to see me shining." Sandra's hands froze in the soapy water. A party? She quickly dried her hands and tiptoed closer. Vivian's voice rang out through the window. "Don't worry about him, he's just decoration. He will sit in one corner like always. Nobody cares about cripples." Sandra covered her mouth in shock. She rushed back to the basin before Vivian could see her. Her heart pounded. This woman was planning something big. And Richard was about to be disgraced again. That evening, Sandra told Richard carefully. "Sir, Madam is planning one big party next week. She said you will just sit there like decoration." Richard was quiet for a long time, then he nodded slowly. Thank you for telling me. Don't worry, the day she wants to laugh the loudest, maybe the day her shame will be loudest too." Sandra stared at him, her mouth slightly open. She wanted to ask more, but his face told her to keep silent. The following week, preparations filled the house. Vivian bought new dresses, hired caterers, and ordered crates of expensive drinks. She even warned the maid sharply. "Sandra, on that day, make sure everything is perfect. I don't want shame in front of my friends. As for him," she pointed rudely at Richard, "dress him in something simple. Let him sit quietly in one corner. I don't want him to spoil my pictures." Sandra's heart squeezed with anger, but she simply nodded. "Yes, ma'am." That night, Richard called her quietly to his room. "Sandra," he said in a low voice, "on that day, I want you to stay by me. No matter what happens, don't leave my side." Sandra frowned slightly, then nodded. "Yes, sir. But why?" Richard looked into her eyes for a long time, then whispered, "Because truth cannot hide forever. Even lies get tiring one day." The long-awaited Saturday finally came. From morning on, Vivian was moving up and down, shouting and giving orders like she was the queen of the house. Caterers arranged tables in the compound, loud music blasted from big speakers, and expensive drinks filled the crates. Neighbors gathered at the gate, peeping and gossiping. How can Vivian organize such a thing in her husband's house? She's flexing while her husband is inky suffering in that wheelchair. Inside, Richard sat quietly on his chair, wearing a simple shirt and trousers. His face was calm, almost too calm, like someone who already knew what others didn't. Sandra stood beside him, helping to arrange his clothes. She bent and whispered, "Sir, are you sure you're okay?" Richard gave a faint smile. "I'm fine, just stay by me like I told you." By afternoon, guests started trooping in. Vivian's boyfriend, Henry, entered boldly. He was a flashy man in his late 30s, wearing a designer suit and a flashy wristwatch shining on his hand. Right there in front of everybody, he kissed Vivian on the cheek, as if the husband in the corner didn't even exist. "My baby," Vivian shouted, holding him tight. "Welcome. Today we'll scatter this party." Henry laughed loud, greeting his friends. "Everybody eat, drink. Today is an enjoyable day." Vivian's friends surrounded her, admiring her dress, her necklace, and her makeup. She posed for pictures, smiling wide. From time to time, her eyes moved to where Richard sat, and she smiled. "Take a look at him," she whispered to one of her friends, "just sitting there like decoration. This is my real life now." The party was sweet. There were plenty of drinks, food, laughter, and music, but through it all, Richard sat quietly, with Sandra by his side. She noticed how his eyes scanned the crowd, like he was waiting for the right time. Then it happened. As Henry lifted a glass to toast, Vivian pulled him close and shouted with pride, "To my real man, the one who makes me happy. Forget that cripple there, this is the man of my dreams." The whole place went silent. Some people gasped, some laughed nervously, others looked away in shame. Every eye turned to Richard. Sandra's chest tightened. She wanted to cry, but just then Richard sat straight in the chair, calm. Slowly, he rolled his wheelchair forward to the middle of the compound. The music stopped. The whispers grew louder. "Vivian," Richard's voice came out strong, louder than it had been in months. "You have disgraced me enough. You mocked me. You insulted me, even before strangers. But today the truth will speak." Vivian hissed. "Which truth? Please go back to your corner before you faint here. Don't spoil my party." Richard raised his hand. Just then, 2 black SUVs stopped outside the gate. Men in fine suits stepped down, carrying briefcases. The crowd gasped. The men walked straight to Richard and bowed. "Sir, we are ready." The compound fell silent. Vivian's smile disappeared. Richard turned to the crowd and spoke. "For months, I stayed in this chair, hiding who I really am. I wanted to test the woman I called wife, to see if she would love me for me, not for money. Today, the test is finished." He nodded to one of the men. The man opened a briefcase full of money, documents, and photos of houses, cars, and companies. People shouted in shock. "I am not poor," Richard continued. "I am a billionaire. I own houses in Lekki, Abuja, and abroad. I own companies Vivian cannot even pronounce. But I hid everything, just to know if she truly loved me. Now I know the truth." Vivian staggered back. Her eyes opened wide. "What? Richard, tell them you're joking," she stammered. Richard's eyes burned. "Do I look like I'm joking?" he asked. Henry dropped his glass, shocked. "Wait, you mean he is—" "Yes," Richard said firmly. "I am everything Vivian mocked me for not being, and she is nothing but a lesson in betrayal." The murmurs grew louder. Vivian's legs shook. She held her chest, but Richard lifted his hand again. "Wait, I'm not done." The crowd became quiet. Richard placed both hands on his wheelchair. Everybody watched, confused. Then, to Vivian's horror, Richard began to rise. One leg straightened, then the other. He stood tall, his back straight and his eyes blazing. Vivian screamed. "Jesus! Richard, you can walk?" Gasps filled the air. Some people even covered their mouths in shock. "Yes," Richard said in a thundering voice. "I can walk. I have been fine for months. My doctor," he pointed at a man in suit, "told me long ago that I was healed. But I told him to wait for this very day." He turned to Vivian. "Today is the day. I reveal the truth. I am not crippled anymore, and I am not poor." Vivian collapsed, crying on the ground. "Oh my God, my enemies have finished me." Richard's lips curved in a cold smile. "No, Vivian, you finished yourself. My condition was the test. My silence was the trap. Your wickedness destroyed you." The crowd shouted. Some laughed at Vivian's disgrace. Vivian's makeup became messy on her face as she begged. Her lovely boyfriend, Henry, hissed, grabbed his car key, and walked out, leaving her on the floor. The shame in that compound was not for Richard anymore. It was Vivian's. Then Richard turned to Sandra, who stood silently still, shocked, with tears running down her face. "This young woman," Richard said, "was the only one who stood by me. She respected me when my wife spat on me. She gave me strength when I wanted to die. Today I honor her." Voices erupted again. Vivian cried out, "No, Richard, please, you cannot—" But Richard cut her short. "Keep quiet. Your chance is gone. From today, I am free from you." He stretched his hand to Sandra. She trembled, then slowly placed her hand in his. The crowd clapped, shouting, "God has caught her, serves Vivian right." Richard looked at Sandra softly. "Thank you for seeing me when I was invisible. From today, you are no longer a maid. You are my partner, my love." Sandra shook with emotion. She wanted to say something, but the words stemmed heavy in her mouth. Finally, she stammered, "Sir, I don't know what to say." "You don't need to say anything," Richard whispered. "I will show you the same love you showed me." Sandra nodded, and uncontrollable tears dropped from her eyes, and she nodded calmly. The crowd cheered. Vivian cried on the floor, but nobody looked at her again. Richard lifted his chin and spoke this last time. "Never look down on anybody because of their condition. This should be a lesson to you all. Life can change in one day. The wicked will fall, but those with good heart will rise." He walked forward strongly, holding Sandra's hand. For the first time in years, he felt alive. He had lost, but in the end, he found something greater: true love. And Vivian? She remained on the cold floor, drowning in her own shame. My dear, life can change in one single moment. Richard lost his strength, and even his marriage, yet in the end, he found something more: true love. His ungrateful wife, Vivian, was left to drown in disgrace, while the humble maid, Sandra, found love that was real. Remember this: never judge a person by their condition, because you don't know the battles or blessings they carry in silence. Have you ever been humiliated because of one condition or situation you found yourself in? Tell me in the comments below. I'm reading everyone's comment. And if this story touched your heart, don't keep it to yourself. Share it. Follow Roots of the African Tales for more, and let others learn the lesson too.